Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our final panel of the day. I hope you had a fun time with the dance party. Our final panel is Leadership in Entrepreneurship and Innovation, Leading Beyond the Status Quo. I'm Sarah Dewell, and I'm your moderator, and I'm a proud two-time alumna of U Calgary Nursing, as well as a member of the Leader in All of Us organizing committee. I'm very excited about this final session. We are going to hear from four entrepreneurs: Amy Deagle, Carol Gray, Leah Wuitschik, and Julia Imanoff. They'll share with you their insights into how they have innovated their nursing practice. The chat's open. Please feel free to enter questions and comments there.
Hello, I'm Julia Imanoff. I'm a perinatal nurse specialist, doctoral scholar at the University of Calgary, and recently CEO and co-founder of Colo Families. I am honored to be here among so many inspirational nurse leaders, and today we're here celebrating the leader in all of us. So I want you to take a minute and type into the chat how you lead in the work that you do. I'd love to hear it. In my roles as a nurse educator, as a registered nurse, as a parent, and a doctoral scholar, I've come to understand the core of effective leadership is in the quality of the relationships that we create. Leadership is relational. Quality relationships can be fostered when we have this authentic and meaningful connection with others. Caring relationships can in turn provide opportunities for growth, development, and a secure base for others to really thrive. Parenting is another great example of this theory in action. In my role supporting parents as a perinatal nurse specialist with Colo, as well as in my doctoral research, I'm looking at the impact of quality parent-child relationships on child development. And research has shown that the higher the quality of the parent-child relationship, the more influence in a positive way it has on the child's growth and development, not just in infancy, but across their entire lifespan. Parents provide that secure base, that quality caring relationship that gives the child an opportunity to really grow, develop, and thrive. And I've begun to see this pattern of quality relationships between care provider, care receiver, and the outcomes being growth, development, and thriving, not just in parent-child interactions, but in nurse-patient relationships, and as well as in nurse-leader and team relationships. In her book, Dare to Lead, Brené Brown defines connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from relationships. That's the type of connections we need to foster. Nurses and nurse leaders, like parents, can provide these opportunities for patients, colleagues, and teams to thrive through these deep and meaningful connections. But there are many barriers facing quality relationships and deep connections at the best of times. And sadly, we're not in the best of times. In 2020, we have seen the world shift from the coronavirus pandemic. There's been this balancing act between distancing ourselves to keep each other safe, but also this desperate need for human connection. At the same time, we've also seen an expedited technological advances and integration into healthcare at an unprecedented rate. Widespread adoption of telehealth has improved accessibility to care for a lot of people. And while there are great benefits to these advances, especially during a global pandemic, there's also this danger that they pose on forming quality human connections. Distance and closeness, loneliness and connection, these are the forces at play in nursing in 2020. There's a push away from the bedside, away from the patient, as masks, screens, and distance come between us. Yet there's also this pull back to each other, a primitive need for connection. So how we as a profession will balance these forces out, I believe, will play a pivotal role in the future of what nursing practice will look like. And in the face of these challenges, during a pandemic with rapid technology integration into healthcare, we need to foster these human connections. And I suggest we do them by asking deep questions, holding space, and responding with care. How we connect to each other in a COVID and hopefully soon a post-COVID world is a social dilemma just as much as it is a nursing one. I was recently at a virtual TEDx event in Calgary, and I met a fellow from Toronto who inspires and coaches others to spark authentic connections in social and educational spaces. And the central skill that he focuses on is asking deep questions. And by deep, he's referring to the kind of questions that go deeper than the superficial conversation that we tend to revert to. And this reminded me of an article I read quite a long time ago. It was from 1992 by Brenda Cameron, and it's called The Nursing How Are You? She brings to light the difference between the superficial or social how are you and the deeper question within a nursing context of how are you? In the social context, it might be, hey, how are you? Where you've left the conversation and walked out the door before the person has even responded. Versus what a nurse asks a patient, how are you? When she's sitting at their bedside, talking to a patient with a poor prognosis. That's a very different context of how are you, really? Those deep questions go beyond that superficial layer of social niceties, and they really try and tap into a meaningful human connection. But really, that's just the first step. We also need to hold space for them to respond authentically. And sometimes this means sitting still with the other person and offering them a safe place to share. This is in stark contrast to the social how are you, which in turn usually gets an equally superficial response of fine, even when the person is obviously not fine. Asking those questions and then holding space is a part of caring. And I would argue it's actually an ethical imperative to care. And by ethics, I'm not meaning a moral sense of right or wrong, but rather as philosopher Emmanuel Levinas describes ethics as a set of principles that really dictate or guide behavior. And in particular, he describes the ethics to the other, where really we have this responsibility for us to care for each other. And this idea really resonates with the ideas of ethics in nursing practice as well. And then what? We've asked the questions, we've held space, but now we also have the additional obligation of how to respond. And this is what scares many people away from even entering into deep conversations. I've heard this a lot from my nursing students in the context of learning how to do domestic violence screens. Many of them are terrified to ask because they don't know how to respond. They can ask the question, they're okay with sitting and holding space, but what's next? Responding with care, compassion, and empathy, thankfully, is a skill that can be trained and nurtured. In fact, we start learning this skill as infants. In child development, we call this serve and return, or it's the foundational elements of a conversation, the back and forth between a parent and a child, where the infant might serve up a cue like crying, and the parent then responds in turn appropriately. And by appropriately, I usually mean it matches. The serve matches the return. And what that looks like is if an infant's crying, you wouldn't expect the parent to laugh at them. You would instead expect them to respond by comforting and soothing. So it's an empathetic and appropriate response. And this is a very basic example. And so it may seem very basic. But as conversations become more complex, responding appropriately becomes equally as complex, if not more so. Responding with care is a skill that I've seen some nurse leaders do extraordinarily well at times. And I think it's also important to note that just like parents, leaders don't always get it right either. Sometimes it's done really well, and other times it isn't. The important thing is that we try to do it well. And when it turns sideways on us, we acknowledge that too and learn from it. Learning a new skill is hard work. And even if you're an experienced leader, you can probably attest that responding with care is not always an easy task. And it's learning something new every time you try it. But it's one that we can all benefit from developing. It will impact our relationships, our teams, and our organizations. We need to take action to pull back towards connection. For just as connection provides opportunities to thrive and grow, the reverse is also true. Dr. Vivek Murphy discusses the impact of disconnection and loneliness in his book, Together. He describes the biological drive for connection and safety. And he describes loneliness as a symptom of disconnection and as a risk factor for mental health concerns like depression or substance misuse and abuse. And I'll quote him in saying, all of this research would seem to confirm that our drive to connect is one of our most important survival instincts. It is in our relationships that we find emotional sustenance and the power we need in order to thrive. Now, let's think about this in the context of leadership. In 2014, Simon Sinek did a TED Talk that spoke about the environment of care that leaders can promote by acting, modeling, and rewarding it in the workplace. He likens great leaders to great parents in the way that they care for their employees much like their children. And just like parents, leaders can make their employees feel seen, heard, and valued in order to help the individual, the team, and the organization thrive. I find it interesting the parallels between Simon Sinek's talk from a leadership perspective, Dr. Murthy's book from a healthcare provider's perspective, and even my own work from a child development perspective. At each level, we're seeing the same thing, the primal essential need for human connection. We need this now more than ever. So this is my challenge to you as individuals, as nurses, and as future leaders. In the face of a pandemic and an inundation with technology, where the way we connect with others has been fundamentally shifted and it's pushed us further away, I challenge you to be pulled back into authentic connections with others by asking deep questions, holding space, and responding with care. I want to see how the future of nursing can foster the healing power of human connections. And I can only imagine what that world will be like and how it will thrive. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to be a member of this panel. Since this is a U of C event, and before we begin on my topic, I wanted to share with you my University of Calgary nursing pin. As some of you are aware, in the past, upon graduating as a nurse, we received a pin to wear on our uniforms. This was my pin graduating with my BN in 1975. I'm not sure if nursing pins are being produced now, but it did represent a symbolic connection to the university and to the profession. I was proud of this pin, and to this day, it is like new. My presentation is focused on how we overcome our fears, embrace courage in our everyday life, and know that our influence makes a difference. A bit about me. I believe that key experiences set the stage for who we are meant to be. I have been privileged to have had wonderful nursing and leadership opportunities over the years. From outpost nursing in Northern Alberta to public health leadership in Edmonton and Calgary. As Alberta reorganized health authorities, my roles encompass major acute care portfolios. With the creation of Alberta Health Services, I moved into leading the province-wide portfolio of population and public health, including Indigenous health. Throughout my tenure of VP and senior VP roles, I led and supported teams in several major transformational projects for new care models and creation of new capital building sites. 7.5 years ago, Leah and I formed our own company, TallTrees Leadership. It has been quite a trip so far. For the next few minutes, I'm going to share with you my personal insights and experience with overcoming fear, developing courage, and recognizing the importance of influence and leadership. As you will see in my primary years, I lived in East Africa. I've been back twice, and since we can't travel due to COVID, I will take you on a photo journey to the African Serengeti as we walk through the key aspects of my talk with you today. The photos are courtesy of my husband. When you see this picture, I imagine many of you may experience the visceral reaction of fear. It may conjure up anxiety. You may be repelled by what you see and by your emotion. You may feel paralyzed and want to withdraw. While fear may be essential for survival in the wild, unfortunately, fear is a common emotion for leaders, nurses, and teams in clinical environments. Research has shown that fear is a common element in toxic environments, particularly in healthcare. But what is at stake for us as leaders when we are held back due to being fearful? It limits our ability to collaboratively relate to others. It may stifle productive decisions, ignore challenging situations, push down creativity, and resist positive change. It may be a huge barrier to innovation. The status quo may feel safe, may be more comfortable, even though it may be dysfunctional. When things are broken or we know that change is necessary, we need to call on courage to lead us to action. Tim Porter O'Grady and Kathy Mallock state, courage often does not emerge until the pain of not doing something exceeds the fear of doing it. When I read this, I realized that over the years, this is what has driven me to overcome my fear and be courageous in leading and supporting the implementation of new care models, system changes, and improved processes for quality and access to healthcare. It also was the basis for becoming an entrepreneur. I enjoy understanding the roots or origins of words. Bravery has the root of being bold, including wild. Courage has the root origin of cœur, the French word for heart. Knowing the origin of courage speaks to me as encompassing a sense of wholeness, bringing compassion and generosity in my actions. This is the essence of how I want to live in my potential. And just for you to know, the Jeep in the slide has broken down. We were on a 6-hour journey across the landscape. I'm not walking away. I'm actually looking for rocks to put behind the wheels so we can jack up the Jeep. Little did we know, as we motored along later, we discovered a group of lions in the grass. Better sometimes that we don't know what is ahead of us. Being courageous implies taking risks. It is only when we take a risk we move out of our comfort zone by expanding our thinking and taking action. The purpose is to create change and hopefully produce the intended results. As we experience taking risks, it soon becomes evident that it is not always going to work out perhaps as we wished. In my experience, the risks are a necessary part of the evolution of creating innovation. It assists me to gather more information, context, and understanding of opportunities and challenges. It also hones my degree of resilience. How will I respond? Do I retreat? Or do I evaluate what has happened and make the shift to rectify the problem and to grow from the experience? There are many times when I've had to course correct and reevaluate our strategy. Feeling disappointed, even disillusioned, is appropriate, but what happens next is the key to moving forward effectively. Everyday courage does not have a start and end date. It is continuous and becomes a mantle that we wear as a second skin. We were in a Jeep crossing a flooded bridge. We made it over. The truck did not. As you see the shadow of the aircraft, you know we are leaving civilization and moving out into the wilderness. The landscape is fuzzy. This is similar to the experience of embarking on a new venture, such as a business, or making a major change to the current organization, service delivery, or even the culture. Do we anticipate opportunity, adventure, beauty, even excitement? Or is it emptiness, barriers, and even danger? In my experience, becoming an entrepreneur was a mixture of all these narratives and emotions. Early on, I felt like I had lost my footing. Where was the environment that was familiar? Where are the recognizable components that I can count on for support? If this was you, how would you find your grounding again? Who do you turn to and what do you turn to for your anchor and a platform that will propel you to take the next steps? How do we know where we are going and what to do? What compels us to speak up, take action, stay the course, and make a difference? For me, this is knowing my purpose in brief and compelling statements that define me and what I need to do. I discovered this by responding to people when they asked, "What is important to you? What do you do?" Other than the usual description of my role and functions as a leader, here is my real purpose. I open doors. I enable others to flourish. I make a difference. The open doors reflected my actions of helping individuals and teams to navigate the system, make connections, remove barriers, and being the bridge between the hierarchy and frontline, and so on. Not the typical organizational purpose, but it is me. Nick Craig and Scott Snook describe their research and their development work with leaders. They believe that the process of articulating your purpose and finding courage to live it is what they call purpose to impact, is the single most development task that you can undertake as a leader. Their research found fewer than 20% of leaders have a strong purpose. My purpose shows up in my coaching, in my leadership development work, and also in my personal life. It fuels my courage and spirit to create meaningful change for others and for the organizations. What is your purpose? Inherent in actualizing our purpose is to be fully committed and to take action. From my perspective, this is powerful in leading and supporting innovation. Challenging our fears is a conscious decision to react differently. It includes suppressing our emotions and shifting our mindset to being courageous. Knowing that being courageous is a skill that may need to be practiced every day, perhaps never perfect, but enough to propel us to positive action. Never doubt that your influence as a leader does not matter. You only need to ask, what would have happened if I had not been the leader at this time or place? Would the transformational changes have occurred? Would team members and other leaders have flourished in their own leadership? My proposition is that each of us influences others and events every day. Your influence is powerful. Being a courageous leader means you may hear a comment like, "We count on you to ask difficult questions." Or you would say, in the face of resistance for a major project, "Stay with me. We got this. Let us do this together." Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, my name is Leah Wuitschik. Along with Carol Gray, I am the co-founder of TallTrees Leadership. We offer professional coaching and leadership development to healthcare professionals and organizations. I'm an alumnus of the Faculty of Nursing at U of C, and so I'm thrilled to be here with you and to share a seat on this panel with my fellow alumni. For the next few minutes, I want to share some ideas on moving beyond surviving to thriving, leveraging disruption in leadership. But first, I really want you to get to know me a bit. You may notice that this photo is a few years old. This was my start. I was working my first job as a nurse on an acute care unit at Foothills Medical Center, specializing in pulmonary medicine and thoracic surgery. My time there was incredibly valuable, not only from a nursing skills perspective, but as an opportunity to really learn about myself and what I stood for. One of the best lessons I took from there was that I have it in me to get through anything. I had to be resilient. And this was a lesson that has served me well throughout my career. From frontline nursing, I moved into infection prevention and control, which proved to be another amazing and also very challenging area of practice, particularly through the times of SARS and the H1N1 pandemic. These crises really forced me to step up as a leader and to lead in a way that is grounded in reality while also inspiring hope, which was really needed at the time, and of course is so relevant today. Eventually, I needed a new challenge, and I made the transition into more community-based leadership roles, including in areas of health promotion and chronic disease management. And these opportunities gave me the chance to see healthcare from outside of acute care. And I loved my time working with my colleagues, community members, elected officials, and most of all, the diverse and vulnerable populations that I worked with. All of these experiences really shaped my perspective on leadership, and wanting to learn more, I undertook a Master of Arts degree in leadership and a graduate certificate in executive coaching, which were both really the catalyst for my journey into entrepreneurship. It was during my time doing graduate education that I started to think about how I could serve people and continue to serve people, but in perhaps a way that was different than the more typical path. I've always been quite an independent thinker, and so the idea of creating something completely new was really appealing. And I'm lucky to have a great business partner who's also my mom, Carol Gray. Together, we decided to take a leap of faith and founded TallTrees Leadership. And to be clear, this was something that neither of us had done before. And to be honest, it was really scary. And it was a huge learning curve. And at the same time, it's worked out beautifully in that I get to do what I love every single day. I work with healthcare leaders across Canada and internationally, and I support them in the work that they do and also help to nurture their leadership. Every day looks different for me, from coaching healthcare leaders one-on-one to facilitating team building and leadership development, both virtually and, pre-COVID in person, to producing and hosting my podcast, Central Line Leadership in Healthcare, to teaching coaching skills, to working with organizations like Leads Canada. The diversity of my work is what gets me excited to head into the office every morning. I have the opportunity to be creative, to have flexibility, be innovative, and to also make a difference. One of the things that stood out to me throughout my career, particularly in the work that I do, is that disruption is the foundation of leadership. I experienced it firsthand as I became an entrepreneur, and I also hear it every day from my clients who are all disrupting the status quo in various ways. And certainly the best example is our experience in the face of COVID-19. We know the world has changed. Right now, it's evident in everything we do, from grocery shopping to parenting our kids to how we go about doing our work. I hear the term the new normal being used in almost every conversation I have with others. And the reality is that the state of normality is constantly evolving, and this pandemic is part of that evolution. What we do know is that healthcare will never be the same after this. Without a doubt, there are devastating consequences to this. However, in the midst of all of that, there is also opportunity. As we continue to do our work in this time of disruption, the question we need to ask ourselves is, how do we emerge from this stronger than ever? And I believe the answer lies in leadership. When we're faced with adversity and turmoil, we are called to take a hard look at ourselves. And it's during these times of fear that our true characters often emerge. When the waters are calm, it's easy for us to continue down our familiar path, to do things the way we've always done. We maintain that status quo. During disruption, however, our usual patterns of behavior aren't effective in the same way. We have to do things differently. The moment you step into your role, whatever that role is, show your character. And I will say, character is a choice. You get to choose how you present yourself to the world and in your work. Amid uncertainty and stress, you can choose to be authentic, competent, inspiring, and forward-looking. Leadership is about people being willing to follow you, and these characteristics are what will inspire this willingness. This is also an opportunity to connect with what's important. It's a tough time, so compassion needs to be the foundation of our character for ourselves and for others. Mahatma Gandhi was credited with saying, "Compassion is a muscle that gets stronger with use." And compassion, which is grounded in relationship, is essential for our ability to work with others, but also for others. Through this, we can shift the focus from one that is solely motivated by chastising errors and being reactive to one that forgives while highlighting what is going right. During a crisis, it's easy to focus on the things that are going poorly, whereas strong leaders inspire a focus on our collective strengths and celebrate even the smallest of wins. In this time of uncertainty, the path forward is unclear. A client of mine shared a story in which his 9-year-old daughter asked him, "Dad, is this one of those times we read about in our history books?" The answer is yes. Living and working through a crisis challenges our fundamental values. Our values are those principles that we judge to be important in our life. Those are the things that keep us awake at night. The brilliant thing about values is that they serve as a guide to keep you moving forward in a way that supports you to lead through anything. There's a saying in leadership, you either lead by example or you don't lead at all. Or, as I like to say in the wise words of Yoda, do or do not, there is no try. The opportunity before us is to draw on those values, muster our resilience, and move forward and lead. And to be clear, this is not to say you can change everything. That is not reality. It's about recognizing what is within your control and doing something about that. The difficulty in a crisis is that our values can be lost, and they get lost amid the stress, the emotion, the overwhelm, overwork. But it's during these times that we must embrace those values as they serve as our North Star guiding us forward. Values are the core of who you are, what you care about, and why you do what you do. The more you can know about your values, the more you'll be able to make sense of what is happening. And the other important thing to think about, staying true to our values, is that others will respond to someone who has clear principles and is willing to act on those principles. And this resonates with others. It inspires confidence, it supports commitment. Go first, set the example, and never underestimate the power of this. We know that change is difficult at the best of times, and this transition and this period is particularly painful. And we also know that the long-term effects will reverberate for many years to come. We have before us a challenge, and the reality is that challenge is one of the best teachers you can have. So when we're faced with that wall of adversity, our commitment and our resilience is tested. Healthcare as a whole is facing that wall. And to make our way to the other side, we need to overcome uncertainty and fear and achieve our best. And this requires learning and growth. And I believe this is a foundational shift in the way we perceive health and also in the way we deliver care. The opportunity is to lean into a growth mindset. We've all experienced circumstances in which our resilience has been challenged, And we've been able to tap into our strengths and determination and overcome them. Resilience is not something we're born with. It is something that is developed over time. And leaders know this. In fact, resilience needs to be learned. It needs to be nurtured. And this is a key area where leaning into a growth mindset serves us. Through some grit, we can overcome fear and see that the wall that is in front of us is not something insurmountable, but is an opportunity. What is on the other side? And how much do you want to get over there? There will certainly be missteps along the way, but these points are incredibly valuable for learning and developing your leadership. There is no doubt that this experiential learning creates the best leaders. So as we come to a close, I want to invite you to think of the question that I asked at the beginning, which was, how do we emerge from this stronger than ever? It comes down to leveraging disruption as a brilliant, although typically uncomfortable tool for growing leadership and moving beyond just surviving to a place of thriving. This is really challenging to do, but as we've talked about, there are things you can do to support yourself. The first, show your character. Tap into those values, recognize what is important, and lean into your compassion. Second, you either lead by example or you don't lead at all. So this is about jumping in and amidst so much that is out of our control, find what you can change and do it. Model the way forward. And finally, recognize that challenge is one of the best teachers you can have. Seek out and nurture that growth mindset and your resilience, and utilize these innate resources to capture the learning and innovation that you are experiencing and shape your leadership into something that is new and exciting. Welcome the opportunities ahead of you. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amy Deagle, and I am thrilled to be here with you today as part of the Leader in All of Us conference, sitting on the panel for leadership in entrepreneurship and innovation. I graduated from the U of C in 2006 and spent the first part of my career in rural nursing, mostly in labor and delivery, doing travel nursing. I did a master's of nursing down in the States with a specialty in certified nurse midwifery and women's health. And so when I came back up into Alberta from doing my training down there, I worked as a midwife for a brief period of time, but really found my niche in primary care and helping develop women's health and prenatal programs through various primary care networks. And in 2016, I took a management job with the Calgary Rural Primary Care Network. And through that experience, really realized that there was a gap in skills, at least for myself, within the management and leadership of nursing. And so I decided to create a network of nurses that could come together, share their leadership experiences, get coaching, and really mentor and inspire each other on their leadership journeys and in management as well. And so that's how the International Network of Nurse Leaders was created. And it really evolved from there, really with this theme of every nurse is a leader, and we have the ability to impact people, influence change, and we really do have the power to change the world. And so it really evolved from there. And through the interviews I was doing for the members, I was interviewing these amazing nurse leaders who were giving so generously of their time. And I thought, I can't keep this behind a paid firewall program. I need to share it with people. And so that's really where the Shift Change podcast was born from. And we launched in August of 2019, and our first season wrapped up in August of 2020. And that Shift Change podcast has really been a catalyst for so much change and growth in my life. It was an innovation that at the time not many people were doing, a nursing specific podcast, especially around leadership. There was a few clinical based ones, but I really wanted a way to share nursing stories and share the voice of nurses. And so that's really how that podcast came to be. I'm also provincial counselor for Karna. I just finished my first year of a 3-year term. And in August, I took the position for the Director of Health Professions with RPAP, which is the Rural Health Professions Action Plan. And so, you know, as in nursing, there's many different places you can fit, many career paths. I've had an innovative career, I would say, done lots of different things, and I'm so grateful to be a nurse and for the great foundation I had coming from the U of C nursing program. So I talked a little bit about the INNL and how things kind of progressed from the first vision I thought it was going to be to where it is now, how the Shift Change podcast really came to be just a way for me to share nursing voices and stories. On that note, there's a bit of imposter syndrome that I feel presenting here today, because in the last couple of weeks, I made the decision to pause the INNL. My mom was diagnosed with cancer this summer, and I'm her primary caregiver, and it just felt like I was holding too many things, and some things needed to just pause for a moment. The Shift Change podcast hopefully will be back starting in January. But I wanted to address that, and it really filters into some of these things I wanted to talk to you about today, my leadership takeaways, and really this core piece of it's okay to take a rest and a break, and that doesn't mean a failure. And really we need to look at taking a rest and a break and not just straight out quitting. And I know a lot of nurses, whether you're in entrepreneurship, clinical bedside nursing, management positions, this year has thrown us curveballs that we've never could have anticipated in our lives. There's a lot of heaviness. There's a lot of people that feel that they're barely getting by and everything just feels so heavy. And I just want to take a minute to acknowledge you if that's the way you're feeling right now, that it's okay. And it's okay to take a rest. It's okay to take a pause. There's no harm in doing that. And really, it doesn't mean you failed. It means that you're honoring yourself and you'll be back stronger than before. And part of the piece of entrepreneurship and innovation is really being able to be adaptable and flexible and to view your business or your career as an evolution. And so, you know, in these periods of rest and pause, it's a good time for reflection, what's working, what's not, so that you can build back stronger than before. So the 3 takeaways that I wanted to share with you today are really based off of an interview I did for the podcast with Barb Shellian, and she talked about her 4 leadership pillars. And it encouraged me to create my own and use those as guides, not only in the business, but also in my personal life. So the first one is to be purposeful. And that's really to be intentional on the work that you are doing. And so whether that's your why in business, your why for being a nurse, really finding that foundational core piece, your pillar, that helps frame your decisions. So for example, the International Network of Nurse Leaders was born because I believed nurses have the power to change the world. And I believed that through helping inspire nurses and amplify their voices and help connect them, that we could create great movements of change. And so that framed all the work that was done with the INNL and the podcast. And that's been the pillar through that business. And so if you have your why, you're going to know that is your goalpost that you are focusing on, and If you need to take a rest or a pause in accomplishing it, that is okay. It is not a failure. That's your pillar that you are working towards. And if you frame all of your work towards that, you're going to be a success. The second pillar is to be adaptable. So you can be flexible in your methods and still committed to your why. So when you start a business, pitch an innovative idea, try something different, there's always an element of quote unquote failure. And I really would love it if we could stop using the word failure for when something didn't go exactly according to plan. Because if you remain flexible in your methods, but committed to your why, even if that iteration of your business doesn't look the way you thought it was in the beginning, if you have to pivot or change, that's not a failure, that's a learning. And if you can learn from those experiences and grow from those experiences, you're going to be much better off in your business and your career. So really a key piece in entrepreneurship and in life is be adaptable. So learn from those quote unquote failures, use them as lessons for growth, be flexible to adapt and pivot as challenges come up. We know that 2020 has rocked us all. But you can still be committed to that why. It can still be the thread that's pulling you forward. It just may not look like you thought it would be to get there. The third pillar is to be resilient. And that's really a key piece, obviously, for 2020. And that's really about finding that inner strength, taking care of yourself, even in really tough and challenging times. That's where the pause and the break come in. It's okay to let some of those things you're holding sit for a minute so that you have the capacity to just keep going. And when times feel so heavy, anything can feel overwhelming, and it's the smallest thing that can put you over the edge. Telling you to start a hour-long workout program when you can barely get out of bed is not helpful. But it's really about building those pieces of resiliency through the tough times. Even if it's a 2-second before you get out of the morning, deep breath, hand over your heart, connect into yourself. Sometimes that's all you have the capacity for, and that's okay. Ideally, building habits of resiliency happen in good times so that you have them in place and they're easier to carry on and maintain in those tough times. But you can start at any time. And like I said, you can start as small as 2 breaths first thing in the morning before you get out of bed. It's all about managing yourself and really connecting back to yourself, because when there are a million demands on you, you feel like you're putting out fires all the time, you feel like you're constantly just being bombarded. It is so quick to burn out and just sink in the overwhelm. And so I want to encourage you, if that's in the space that you're feeling, that it's okay to put down some of those loads that you're carrying. It's okay to pause. It's okay to rest. And it's okay to just look after yourself. And are there little pieces you can do to help start building yourself stronger through this time? Is that doing some meditation, whether it's 2 breaths? Is it doing, 1 push-up a day? Some sort of exercise, something that just connects you back into your body. And I know when we're feeling heavy and overwhelmed, it's the last thing that you think you want to be doing, but it's those critical pieces that we have to focus on in order to get through those times. So that resiliency piece is huge. I know it's hard to start it when everything feels like it's overwhelming and there's a giant weight on you. But you just, if I can encourage you to do one thing, it's start small, start today, and just do something that brings you back to yourself. The fourth pillar, which I know I'm only supposed to give you 3 takeaways, but I'm going to break the rules and give you 4, is to be bold. So whether that's starting a new business idea, pitching an innovative new idea at work or in your business, there is such courage that it takes to put a new idea out there, but you can only grow from that. And it can propel you into places that you never thought possible by taking that risk. again, this may not be the mindset or the frame that you're in right now, and that's okay. That resiliency piece, build it up. And then once you're feeling like you can take on something else, just take action. You can never plan everything out perfectly. Chances are the business or the idea is not going to look the same as you think it is right now, and that's okay. Be flexible in those methods and committed to your why, but take action. You can sit on an idea for years, and I know this because I've done it. And you just need to put it out into the world and then help it grow and learn from those quote unquote failures or setbacks, and really use them to propel yourself forward to the next iteration. I also just wanted to take a quick second to talk about an important call to action that we need to be doing as nurses. And it's part of the 2020 Nursing Now campaign, which has been extended into 2021. And that's for the installation of a chief nursing officer into federal and provincial governments. And I think if 2020 has taught us nothing else, it is the importance of having a nursing voice in government that looks out not only for the best interests of nurses and the profession as a whole, but for the public. We know nursing has a different lens, than our physician colleagues, and that perspective and voice deserves to be heard as well. And so there is an initiative happening, Meet Your Federal NP, through the INNL. And so if you would like some more information on it, I encourage you to just email me, amy@nurseleaders.ca. I think this is so important to bring up and get some attention for. And, the power of nurses is that we have a lot of voices, and, we deserve to be heard. And so if we can take those steps and meet with our federal MPs, we can create a movement of change. And I know that can sound scary. We have lots of resources and talking points to help you. There's tons of documents to support why we need one that have been done by the Nursing Now campaign and the International Council of Nurses, so I can help share those resources. But I really just want to create a call to action here to really put into place chief nursing officers provincially and federally. So if you have questions, you can email amy@nurseleaders.ca. I would love to talk to you more about it. And for everybody that's feeling the weight of 2020, I'm with you. We can get through this. It's okay to pause, take those little moments for yourself, because we can't, fill from an empty cup. It's very cliche, but it's very true. And when you're ready for action and to get out there, I hope you connect with a group that inspires you and propels you into change.
All right. Thank you so much to our panelists for that amazing, your amazing insights and food for thought. I'm really hearing the themes of, I think, connection, compassion, courage, and pause. As we're running a little bit short on time, I'm going to take the opportunity to ask a question that I'll have each of you answer. But the panelists will be checking in the chat and answering questions in the chat. So please feel free to keep posting your questions there. So Carol, Julia, Leah, and Amy, we have heard throughout your presentations threads about values you hold as leaders and leading authentically. How are you living and leading your values in your roles as entrepreneurs? Maybe I'll get Julia to start first.
Sure. I think that's a great question, Sarah. And I think starting from your values is a great place to start as a leader. So sometimes you have to reflect and even figure out what are your values to know where you're leading from and how to lead authentically. So I did a bit of that heavy lifting and introspective work earlier this year. And for me, one of my core values that has really motivated me into these roles has been the value that I see in making a difference. I also love the challenge when things are put before me like a quest. So I kind of get excited and energized when things aren't necessarily easy, but that real drive to make a difference. And I think holding true to those values also means not just changing for the sake of change and making a difference and shifting everything around, but something that Tracy said in the comments a while ago was also staying rooted in nursing and my nursing care, my nursing background, and the foundations of nursing practice, but also being able to grow like a tree almost and branch out and see the full scope and the full capacity of a registered nurse, and kind of having a little bit of that disruption while still being grounded. So I think that's kind of where Colo comes in for me, being grounded in my nursing practice, my nursing ethics, but also seeing the ideas of how nurses can make that change that we want to see in the world.
Great. Who wants to go next?
I can jump in, Sarah, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, when I think about the idea of values, the question that really comes up is, how do I want to serve? As nurses, I think we're all here for the same reason, in that we want to serve in some way. And so similar to what Julia was saying, I had to do some thinking and some heavy lifting as well around what are my values and how does that tie into my desire to serve. So along the way, I was certainly enjoying the work I was doing, but it definitely got to a point where I was needing more. I was needing more in terms of being able to give back and have that impact, but also to be able to be innovative and to be flexible. Essentially, I was seeing this gap between where I was and what I wanted to do. And it really inspired me to think about how to do things a little bit differently and to, take a bit of a leap of faith. And that's definitely one of my values, is that sense of being able to go on a bit of an adventure and to try something new and to try something really scary sometimes as well. And I think the other piece of it too, for me, is really about, I am fortunate that I can be the same in the work that I do in my home, with my family, with my friends, so that idea of really being authentic and the idea of really being connected to who I truly am, and using that as a catalyst for the change that I want to support and the change that I want to see happen in this world. So I think, similar to what Julia is saying, is one of the first steps is really about figuring out what your values actually are. And it's hard work. And it's not a quick process, but it's a process that's well worth doing, because those values are going to serve as those keys to making decisions and helping you guide yourself forward and figure out where you want to be in this world and how you want to give back.
Great. Carol or Amy?
I can step in. It's interesting because choosing what kind of business to have or to do as an enterprise was a challenge, because how does it really fit with our values, and how does it fit with what I want to do and where my passion lies? And what really came to light over time and continues to be there for me are the alignment with my values. And there are three that really make sense for me: continued learning, courage, and adventure. And I will add one other, which is more my purpose, and that is enabling others. And I realized that that is actually what I'm doing every single day. Whether I'm coaching, whether we're doing leadership development, those are the kinds of values and principles and actions and behaviors that are just aligned. They're together, they're consistent, and they actually provide the drive to keep going and to take further risks. So it's just fascinating to me how actually this lines up really, really well.
Great. Amy?
Yeah, so I mentioned it in my presentation there, really knowing your why, which threads into your values and the impact you want to make on the world, and also those personal values too. Just personally, knowing families at the top of mind made it an easier decision to pause the business, knowing that it was my family that needed my attention. Whereas I think if you aren't sure kind of where your values line up, and what's truly important to you, you might be trying to hold on to too many things. So the values really help, not only on the clarity of the type of impact you want to make and the type of business you want to go into and how you want to show up in the world, but also helps in those really tough times as to what are things that you can put down and be okay with putting down, knowing that they'll be there to put back up. And there was that analogy about, you can have the big glass balls and some sand, and if you fill up the vase with sand and then try and stick the balls in, it's not going to fit. Whereas if you put those big balls in first, and then the sand can kind of fill around. So it's really finding those core pieces and doing that work in good times, because then it does help you in those more challenging times, right? So yeah, that's
fantastic. Okay, well, thank you again, Amy, Carol, Leah, and Julia, for this gift of your time and for your insights. And I want to thank all of our panelists for a truly inspirational day. I know for myself that my heart is full and my head is on fire. So we have time for a very short break now, and then we'll have our final speaker, Dr. Sandra Davidson, who will be concluding our conference.